My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, Episode 6. Looking forward to my conversation today with Phil Bowdle. And you can get all the show notes at churchmarketingideas.com/006. And I want to remind you that we put all of our shows and we even put all of our questions and answers and multiple clips from our guests on YouTube. So if you're looking for a specific question or specific answer, or you're looking to share with somebody else, but you don't want to share them the whole podcast, you might just want to share them a piece of the podcast, you could probably find that clip by checking us out on YouTube. So you can go to churchmarketingideas.com/YouTube, and that'll take you right to our channel. You can see all of our videos and all the bits and pieces of how we put the show together so that you can send those off to somebody who might like to find them. And at the end of every single episode, we have a listener question. And today's question is about how do we extend the life of our church's live stream? You know, often we see our live stream and it does really well while it's live on Sunday morning. And then how do we make that last through the week? How can we get more people to see it? So we're going to answer that question at the end of the show. And of course, that answer's already on YouTube as well. Today, I am so looking forward to my conversation with Phil Bowdle, but before we hop into that, I wanted to let you know that our giveaways went so well on our first 5 episodes that today we're giving away a copy of Phil's new book, Rethink Communication. So how can you enter the draw to win? How can you get your chance at winning a copy of Phil Bowdle's new book, Rethink Communication? Well, how you could do that is take a screenshot of the podcast while you're watching today, or a screenshot of YouTube if that's how you're watching, and post it on Twitter or Instagram and tag us at CMI Podcast, Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. So just tag us at CMI Podcast with a screenshot of you watching today, and we'll choose somebody from all the tags that we get to win a copy of Phil Bowdle's book, Rethink Communication. So I'm looking forward today to my conversation with Phil Bowdle. Phil is the creative arts pastor at West Ridge Church in Northwest Atlanta. He serves on the leadership team there and leads a team of creatives in the area of communication, media, worship, and production, where they're on a mission to put Jesus on display with everything they create. Phil recently released a best-selling book, Rethink Communication, a playbook to clarify and communicate everything in your church. And he can often be found speaking at conferences or consulting with churches, helping them rethink communication for the church. After a message from our sponsor, my interview with Phil Bowdle.
Hey friends on the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast and any friends of Adam who are listening to this or watching this, I'm Neil Smith. I'm a consultant, author, speaker. I do all kinds of things. I was a pastor for many years. Social media pastor actually was my job title. And I've been living in the world of social media for many years. I actually wrote a book called Social Media Guide for Ministry about 8 years ago. And I had somebody email me the other day saying, I just got your book. I can't wait to read it. And I was like, don't read the book. It's 8 years old. Social media has changed so much in 8 years. And I wanted to create resources, and I've been creating resources to help churches. I believe, though, I've just created the best resource to help churches grow with social media. Now, I'm talking about grow numerically and spiritually. So I want you to check it out. It's a free resource. There's 3 training videos. We're going to have Facebook comments and learn and grow together. So go to churchmarketingideas.com/grow, churchmarketingideas.com/grow, and go check out this resource. Sign up, get the free resource, and engage in the conversation. Let's start growing your church together using social media.
Well, hey, Phil, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it.
Adam, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so how long ago was it that you wrote Rethink Communication?
And I started the project. I mean, it's been in my mind for a while. It's been a bucket list kind of a thing for a number of years, but really it was around May or June of 2018 where I really started putting pen to paper and start the project. And so it really was probably was a project that should have taken a year and kind of crammed it into about 4.5 months of some intensive writing and a lot of late nights and early mornings and stuff. But yeah, so happened then and released in January of 2019.
Yeah, so we were chatting a little bit before we started about how conversational or how practical your book is, it seems like you went into the process intending for it to be really practical and not philosophical. So why was that important to you?
Well, I had a couple goals going into it. One was just knowing that I've never met a ministry leader that just has so much time on their hands of just wanting to sit down for a week and reading super dense books, especially communication leaders and ministry leaders that I'm trying to serve through this. So my heart and desire for this was that it was broken up and designed and organized in a way that would feel like it was that I was advocating for the person I was trying to have read it.
Sure.
On that level. But a huge part of the conversation part is that when I was writing, and my heart for it was like, I had the end in mind that I wanted to be able to picture a senior pastor, a communications leader, and a student pastor or a ministry leader sitting down at a Starbucks around a really good cup of some kind of good coffee shop. I'll just say that, a good coffee shop, and sitting down and being able to have a conversation about it. And so that changed the lens of how I wrote everything, because I believe communication isn't somebody's job, it's everybody's job. Right. And so everybody has a role to play. So I needed to kind of write it in a way that it connected with the senior pastor, but also was a bridge for that senior pastor to communication leaders and helping them rethink communication. So that shaped everything about how it came together.
Yeah, and there's what I would really love to chat about is that before we can even understand that we need to rethink our communications, there's three major shifts that have happened between engagement and our audience and attention and attendance, I should say. So let's dig into attendance and talk about what has changed, because before we can apply the strategies in the book and talk about announcements or talk about bulletins or talk about how and when we choose to do certain things that traditionally we've already done, we have to understand that we're not still talking about the landscape of the 80s or the 90s.
No doubt.
Or even, just a few years ago, like things are changing. So talk to me a little bit about how attendance has changed.
Yeah, I grew up in the church, and what you would typically expect, my dad being a senior pastor and being there every Sunday, whether I was sick or not, I was going to be there. And you could usually expect that people that called their church home, you could usually expect that they would be there as well. So the old playbook was we could build our communication around an assumption that people were attending usually every week, or maybe at worst every other week, but there was consistent engagement for that. And that worked really well in the way for communication, because the playbook for communication was built around that. And it was built around communicating when people showed up to your building. So we had two strategies. We had what was announced on the stage and what was happening in the bulletin, what was handed out. And usually those were merged, because most times communication was whoever was getting up and literally reading the bulletin during the services of that, and just blending those in. So that was the old playbook. The challenge that we have now is that we can no longer assume that people are attending every week, because we're all learning in the church that I give the example in the book about 10 years ago when I got started here at Westridge and started building our communications department. What I was seeing from our research and study here was people weren't attending every week. They were attending every 2 to 3 weeks. And I remember at that time thinking, wow, this is challenging. Things are changing,
Right.
Fast forward the last couple of years, what we're finding for the average attender, and that's across for us, 10 to 12,000 people that would call our church home. The average person isn't coming once every 2 to 3 weeks. They're coming more like every 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
So for us, part of the foundation of rethinking communication is the challenging question of saying, what would change for all of us in the church if we knew we had 8 to 10 times a year to communicate with somebody in person? That changes not only everything about how we communicate, that changes how we do church.
Right.
That changes the lens that we view, and how we are going to disciple people. And, a lot of people are freaking out about that because their win for the church is attendance. And I don't believe that was the win that Jesus called us to. He said, go and make disciples, go and proclaim the message to all nations. And the cool thing is we've been given all kinds of new tools to be able to do that. So that doesn't devalue the gathering. I think it just means that that's where people are. How do we engage them where they are so that we can keep them connected? And hopefully that leads to attendance. But at the end of the day, what I hope it leads to is, as people engage with our church, that it leads to discipleship, that it leads to helping people take their next step with Jesus. So to understand that, to make those changes, knowing that we may have 8 to 10 times a year to communicate with somebody, it means that we have to change some things about how we're communicating, because a lot of people are still stuck of wondering, hey, we announced it last Sunday and it seemed like nobody showed up and nobody knew about it. And I don't know why. We told them, it's like, well, it's time to rethink that, because what worked before is not going to work anymore. And the old playbook is certainly going to not work anymore. So it's time to rethink it.
So 2 schools of thought on attendance. And I think I'm going to figure out where you fall before I even finish the question. But one school of thought is we need to figure out a way to get people to attend more often. Like we have to increase their attendance. And the other school of thought is we need to embrace the fact that this is the reality of the culture that we live in, and find ways to focus our energy on reaching them where they are. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Hard, tough question. I think where I'd go is I just say, I think the way that people engage with anything now has become decentralized, all of it, and not just the church. That's just the reality. And that's the lens that people are viewing their lives in. When I go on, like last night, I'm checking out Apple AirPods, the new ones. And I'm, thinking, okay, it might be time to check those out. I want to check them out. So what do? I go on bestbuy.com and I see, is it available online? Can I get it faster online, or is it available in stores? Just right there, I'm already trained to think I'm engaging with Best Buy. I'm engaging with them to see if they're the best place to get this and to solve a problem that I have. But I'm just accessing it in 2 different ways. And both experiences are vital. If I go to the store, I'm probably not going to go and I have a bad experience. I'm probably not going to the website again, because I've had a bad experience, not with just the building. I had a bad experience with Best Buy. There's 2 different interactions of that. So where I'd say is, I think, attendance matters, because I think that's a rhythm and a gift that God has given us in the life of believers, to say that matters. When we gather together, it matters.
Right.
But to say that where you can disciple and connect with people online does not matter, that I don't believe that's true. I think they work together. And so, for us as a church, we have to, like, for example, we use we don't do church online. We have a live stream, and we don't promote the mess out of it, because our goal isn't that somebody sees that as their destination. We want that to be a source of connection. And we want them to say, hey, if you're going to only be here 8 to 10 times a year, no matter what we do right now, we're praying that changes. But if that's where you are right now, we're going to say, hey, while you're at the ball field, or while you're at the lake, or where you're traveling, would you stay connected with us and join us online during that time? And we've just been amazed by just giving that as an option for people and investing in it and making it a good experience, so that people will stay connected with us. And what we found is, wow, God can use that live stream just like he can use somebody showing up in the seats.
Right.
And sometimes what we're finding is people are having more connection and engagement and conversation in a digital space than they are in a physical space. So, for us, they have to be, it's a both, and they have to work together without us viewing, we don't have to undervalue what digital can be to try to attempt to overvalue what attendance can be. They both matter.
Right. And we really do have to take this perspective that we can't put it in the bulletin once, or we can't mention it from stage once, or we can't just simply, have a poster in the foyer and hope that everybody sees it on their way past.
No doubt.
And even a lot of series that we're hearing about might only be 4 to 6 weeks. So somebody may only be seeing one message in your series.
Exactly.
And so really thinking about, if this series is of a higher importance, how do we, or is central to the core of the church, how do we think through some ideas on getting it exposed in more ways to more people who may not physically be in the building?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a message that you believe in, you have to care about how you communicate it. And you have to understand not where you want people to be, you have to understand where they are.
Right.
So yeah, you can't count on just communicating it one week and assuming that people will hear it. Just because you said it doesn't mean people heard it. And I give the example of the in-flight announcements. I can't remember the last time I took my headphones out, put the book down, put the iPad down, just because somebody said, all right, we need your attention.
Right.
Here's how you put the seatbelt on. Here's how you do this stuff. Like, no, they didn't capture and keep my attention. And so they didn't advocate for me in that process. But when I go to Southwest, every once in a while, there's somebody that gets it, that's brilliant, that earns and captures my attention and leverages that to get their message across. Mm-hmm. So I think for us in the church, whether it's a series, whether it's an event, whether it's a next step that we want people to take, we have to know where people are. We have to capture and keep their attention and earn it instead of assuming we already have it. And then leverage that, because that's where ministry gets fun. Like, that's where we can really have fun of connecting with people online, in service, having some fun ways to be able to connect with people on that. But the other thing that's on my heart, though, is that at the end of the day, it's not, I can't find the scripture where Jesus just says, hey, make sure that you just get really good event attendance for your church. So we do have to remember at the end of the day, we want to be communicating what God wants for people, not what we want from people.
And that's an important shift to get over. Like, I don't know that it's even up for discussion, right? So this is what it is, and how are we going to adapt to take the message to where people are? Yeah. And so it reminded me when you mentioned Southwest. Last time I was on a flight, the flight attendant came on and said, somebody dropped their phone. We have it up at the front. Is this anybody's phone? Now that we have your attention, we'd like to tell you about all the rules. And, nobody had lost their phone. They just needed to grab that attention. Yep. And that created some level of engagement, which is the next thing that has shifted, is engagement. Mm-hmm. And I think this rolls really nicely into, maybe you could talk about how engagement has changed. Sign up forms for potlucks are not cutting it anymore, because engagement and the way we engage has changed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, jumping back to the attendance days, the reason that people attended more frequently is Sunday was more sacred, and that was more central to the engagement of somebody in the church, as that happened physically inside the walls of the church. Engagement, because we know that people are attending differently, doesn't mean that we have to just accept that. It just means we have to engage them differently. Right. And so the old playbook would say you can engage somebody when they step inside the walls of your church. When they knock on the front doors of your church, you open the door and you engage them. The new playbook, the new reality for us, is the best opportunities we have in the church are to engage people are not inside the walls of the church. They're actually outside the walls of the church. They start there, because before somebody knocks on the front door of your address, your physical address, they're checking you out. They're looking through the window on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on your website. That's how they're engaging with you before you may even know that they're there. And so it just puts the ministry of communication in such importance for us, because we have to advocate for those people. And we have to know that if they have a bad experience when they're looking through the window or checking us out before, we probably have not earned the right to engage with them in person and disciple them and connect with them in that way.
Right.
And so it just means our engagement, we have to have a physical and a digital approach to this. We have to look at it as a both and they have to work together in concert with each other. They can't be in isolation or two whole separate experiences. They have to work together, just like Best Buy did. They know you may access this just by online and never step foot in our doors, or you may be using this as a bridge to connect with us inside the walls of that store. So I think the church, it can look the same. Our mission doesn't change. Our message doesn't change, but how we deliver that message and engage with people can change and can flow, just like the disciples did. I think for us, it looks no different.
So communication online can seem to look very different than communication in person. The fact that we're having a face-to-face conversation is completely different than if we tried to have a conversation like this through email back and forth, right?
Absolutely.
But the cool thing is, this still is digital, right? This still is online. This still is face-to-face. And so what I found is sometimes it takes a shift in mindset to create consistency between what we're engaging in person and what we're engaging digitally, and not see those as two separate worlds, that we have a foot in each one. So what are some of the ways we can create consistency with our message? Like your example of Best Buy, if you had a poor experience online, probably not going into the store. Or if somebody was rude to you at the store, you're probably not going to go buy something from their website. So what are some of the ways we can create consistency between our in-person and our online experience?
Yeah. What I'd say is you have to start with your mission, your message, and clarity around that, so that you have a target to know, are you hitting this in person? Are you hitting this digitally? And you know the roles that both play on that. So, our mission may be, like, we believe as a church that we believe everybody should be in a small group. Not because we just want our numbers to go up for attendance and engagement in small groups. We believe that God's wired them for community, and that discipleship happens best in circles, not in rows. So that's our mission. We want everybody to know that this is our value, and this is God's value. Online, we want to make it really practical and easy for somebody to take a next step and find that. It's not, that may not be their destination. That's their direction. They're going to use online to be that direction. And we need to make sure that when they get there, when they get to the store, when they get to the small group, that they have the experience that we promised on that. So it's really, if you don't have clarity about the win that you're trying to accomplish, both for you and for the person you're trying to reach, you risk the chance that you're going to be off message, and that what you're selling is not what people are getting on that. Or when they get there, they have a different experience than what they expected. So I think it all just goes back to clarity. And that allows you, once you know what your message is, it allows you to change how you're delivering that message or how you're connecting with people. So yeah, again, it starts with clarity.
So the next piece of the puzzle, the third section of the pie, is attention. And we know that there's so many more advertising messages coming at us, and that now doesn't even factor in the fact that you probably don't count status posts from your friends on social media as advertising messages. So there's that many more messages coming at us. How can we, or what do we need to rethink, or what do we need to shift in our perspective on attention in our church communication?
Well, the old playbook would assume that if somebody was physically with you, that you had their attention. I can tell you from growing up in thinking about my early days in school, just because I was in the room doesn't mean I was paying attention. So that, I don't think we ever could really trust in that necessarily. But I think now, think about the information age, think about all the things that we have at the touch, like with a touch from our phone in our pocket, to things that we can access now at a moment's notice that before would have taken days, months, or years to access. I mean, the amount of information that we all have access to is insane.
Right.
So, it's not only is changing, rewiring our brains in some level. What I burden for is it's really changing how each and every single one of us are view, like the filter that we're using for the information that we get. So there's not much trust in the information we get. So we kind of create, like, we've had to build some coping mechanisms, honestly.
Right.
Because, you have, I think it's around 10,000 branded messages a day that we all see. That's not church messages. That's just messages. And so what do we do? Well, like, what do we all do? Well, it probably looks like what I do last night when I'm watching This Is Us. Well, I've recorded it on my own convenience because I can't have the attention of the show when it's broadcasting live. So I'm going to get it on my own convenience. I'm going to do it because I'm going to fast forward through all the advertisement. I didn't watch one advertisement the whole time because it's like, I don't need that. I don't want that. I don't need to be marketed to right now. I want to be engaged with the show. For my computer, I put ad blocks on. I put all these things because it's like, it's too much. And so it's too much in culture, but when you look at it in the lens of the church, I think we have to advocate not for the person that has been there since day one and has always been there. We have to advocate for the person that we have not yet reached. And so when that person that has come into your church for the first time after checking you out online or whatever their path is, or the neighbor that you're bringing for the first time that has gone through a lot or whatever, we have to know that the reality for them is they're going to be guarded. They're going to be assuming that whatever communication is happening to them is with an agenda of what, not what we want for them, but what we want from them.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I think because everybody's guarded and filtered out and not paying attention, we have to know that our goal with attention is we have to capture and keep it. We have to earn it. And we have seconds. We don't have minutes. We have seconds to capture and keep somebody's attention. Just like the in-flight announcements. I mean, if they didn't mention that little line there to help grab your attention on saying, hey, we have somebody's phone,
Right.
where everybody's freaking out, like, oh, like, made me laugh. Or I've been there where they free their flight attendants up to say, hey, if you want to wrap the in-flight announcements, if you want to do whatever, like, you be creative, you be
Right.
you, and make it unique, be authentic to you, and the message isn't changing, but how you deliver that can change so that you can earn somebody's attention. That's what we do in the church. That's what you got to do. That don't assume that you have somebody's attention just because you have their eyeballs,
Right.
because that's not true anymore. But what we do have is when we can be authentic to our message, when we can earn their attention, we have greater ways to engage with them than ever before. But we just have to know that you have to earn it. You don't already have it. And so that changes a lot about how the average church communicates, for sure, of the messages we deliver.
Yeah, and I want to jump into that a little bit because one of the important parts of the book is to realize that everything communicates, right? Not just what we say in the microphone from the stage communicates.
Yep.
Everything about the signage, your parking lot, getting in the front door, how you check in your kids, everything communicates.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are sending a message. And we could be concerned that we're overwhelming people with too many communication messages. But the reality is, if you find that consistency that you talked about in your engagement, then it all seems to happen together. It all feels part of the puzzle until something sticks out like a sore thumb.
Mm-hmm.
And so just dig in a little bit more about helping us realize that everything communicates.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, communication used to be viewed as just as a promotional marketing thing for what you wanted from people. Now, communication is at the heart of everything that we do. So again, using the Best Buy example, if I go there and I have it and they don't greet me or connect with me, or I go there and the signage is all wrong, and where I wanted to get those, headphones, it said that was over here, but it really was somewhere else. That communicates just as much as the product or anything like that is communication.
Right.
So everything plays a role into that, because there's a message at the end of that communication. There's a purpose behind it. There's a next step. So I think for us in the church, part of why I wanted to write it in a way that it wasn't just for the comm leader, but it was really for a staff, for a whole leadership team or whatever, is that we have to know communication isn't somebody's job, it's everybody's job, and we all have a role to play. And if the ministry is, if the communications team or a leader or person or volunteer is communicating something and differently than what the ministry is communicating, or they make a promise that somebody else doesn't deliver on, or whatever, if they're not in sync, then we've missed our opportunity to communicate our message. So at the heart of it, if we know the message we're communicating, we know the methods we're using, they all have to be in sync on that, so that we're advocating for the person we're trying to reach, because everything they do from beginning to end communicates.
Yeah, and I love that communication isn't somebody's job, it's everybody's job.
Yeah.
And so how can we create that consistent experience where, the kids pastor thinks he or she is doing what's best, and the youth guy
it's always the kids pastor, right?
Doing what's best. And listen, I'm not saying, but what I am saying is, so, everybody can individually think they're doing what's best and still not be creating cohesive communications across somebody's experience at your church. So how do we get all on the same page?
Yeah, great question. I think it is always the kids pastor. It seems like we're lucky with a great one here and everything. But so the cool thing about God's mysterious plan is that he's wired all of us differently, and he's given all of us a plan and a purpose and a calling. Mm-hmm. And he said the church is his plan A, and there's no plan B. So with that in mind, I think he's counting on the people that he's called, on the mission he's called, to work together. He's called all of us. He said, I've given you tools and talents and skills. I've given that kids pastor a really compelling message and a heart for those kids and a mission. He may, in his plan, he may have not given him the gift of communication, or or that kids pastor may have thought, oh, I think God gave me a gift of this graphic design, but
Right.
everybody else around them knows that would not be the gift that I think we would recognize there. So what's cool about it is, if we can look at communication, the people in communication, not just as a marketing team or a service department of just helping the ministry just execute what they want, but if we can view them as a ministry, as a partnership with the ministry, the ministry of kids with the ministry of communication, the beautiful thing that happens is you can complement each other, and you're not counting on the kids pastor to be the marketing expert. You're counting on the kids pastor to be the ministry expert for kids. And you're counting on the communications people to say, how do I leverage your heart for what you're trying to do? And how do I leverage that on Facebook or our website? Or how do I take the tools that I've got with the tools that you've got and partner together to make something happen? So it's not rocket science, but it is change. Sure. Because the average church looks at their communications department as a service department. It's a 15-minute oil change. It's hey, here's what I want. Here's when I want it. Here's what I want it to look like. And here's when I need this thing back. Can you go execute that? Make it look pretty. Do whatever you want or whatever. But here's what I want it. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we are literally robbing the gifts, not only of the communications people around you. We're robbing God's gift of what that person could do for the ministry of the church when we do that. So we have to be able to look at these as partnership opportunities, not just a service department, and be able to really leverage the gifts that God's given everybody. And it takes a different level of humility to say we're better together than we are alone. So it means change. It means some new rhythms, and it means communication leaders leading the way and building relationships, not just building service requests and work orders on that. So it takes change all across the board, but it matters because I think we have the greatest opportunities we've ever had to be able to leverage the message of the gospel. So it's time for us to take hold of that. It's time for us to work together.
So I really appreciate the practicality of the book. And as you're listening, you're probably thinking, okay, those are high level ideas about the changes in attendance and engagement and attention. And yes, they are, but they're a very, very small portion of the book, because then Phil digs right into the practical ways that these matter in different pieces of communications throughout your church's communication strategy. So Phil, how about you give me, I'll fire you a communication point and you tell me how this works in a really practical sense. Right, so one of my favorite is announcements during church service.
Okay.
So how
it's
do
my
we
least favorite, but okay.
How do I know, and that's why I'm pushing the button. But how do we rethink what our announcements look like?
Yeah. Going back to attention, I think the average person walking inside the walls of your church or connecting with your church is not looking for hundreds of things to engage with. They are already overwhelmed. So we have to advocate for that person. We have to, with everything we say and communicate, we have to advocate for that person and simplify on that. And so I think for us as when we're thinking about announcements, we have to rethink communication announcements as not announcements, but as next steps. Mm-hmm. And you can't, so for all of us, if I said, hey, I want you to take a next step, and I've got 10 minutes here, and I want to give you the 15 next steps that I want you to take this week. What are we all going to do? We are crippled and we don't do any of them. All right. Like we don't take any next step because we are so overwhelmed. Right. But what would change for us in the church if we said, hey, at the end of this service, we want to give you one next step, one opportunity to apply what you've heard today, and encourage all of us as a body of believers, as a church, to take one next step to become more fully devoted followers of Jesus. If we can do that, then if you give me one thing, now we're talking. Now, so I believe for us in the church, we have to be rethinking that to know this is the attention that we have. These are the things we need to engage people with, and we need to simplify and clarify that so that we can help people take their next step, because they're not going to take everything. They're going to take probably 1 to 2 things. So for us, what I encourage everybody to do, and what we do, is we try to say, for every week of the year, what are the 1 to 2 key next steps that we want people to be able to take during the week? And when we do that, we don't count on just the in-service announcement to be the only way we're communicating.
Right.
We take a chance in every service to share a next step if we have it. And we are, believe it or not, we have some weeks where we don't have an announcement and church still happens and lives are still changed, all this stuff. And those are great weeks, when it's like, hey, we just had a great experience. We'll see you next week, So we take every week of the year and take what are those 1 to 2 key next steps that are that we are encouraging people to take. We share those in service, but we also, in a physical way when people are attending, but we also say the bandwidth that we have on our digital space, for our website, for our email, for our social media, we can't communicate 15 things. So we want to take this same 1 to 2 things and leverage telling stories and engaging people in fun ways on our digital platform and helping them take a next step there. Because it takes, for the average person, about 7 impressions for somebody to take a next step, whatever it is. So do the math. If you're announcing 10 things, that's 70 impressions that you would likely need to make to help somebody do that. That's not going to happen. Like that,
Right.
Nobody has that much bandwidth. But if you say, okay, I'm going to announce this thing on a Sunday, and I'm going to tell a story about it on Monday afternoon on social media, and I'm going to share that on the email. You can only do that for so many things. So all that said, if we view announcements as just a time to be an information dump, we're not going to accomplish what we want. But if we can simplify, create some standards around what matches those 1 to 2 things each week, so that we have a filter and standard for what we say yes to and no to, then I think we have the opportunity to earn people's attention and really effectively communicate those things.
Yeah. So your book covers all different touch points that people are going to experience in church and communications and how to practically apply each of those things. One more thing I just want to jump into is what is the benefit to telling a story rather than broadcasting information? So why would you tell a story about a family who was changed about your small group rather than broadcasting all the dates and times and locations and how to sign up for a small group? Talk to me a little bit about that shift in communication.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that movies are more engaging than instructional manuals, right? We see ourselves in the stories. So I think when we can, when we as a church can share stories of life change, of how Jesus is still in the life change business, when we can share stories that people see themselves in, to know, oh, this is a place for me, I can see myself there. And when we can actually tell practical, simple, non-sensational stories sometimes, where somebody just overcame a barrier that other people have, and they experience some kind of level of breakthrough, then I think what we give the opportunity to is, for people to see themselves in the story and enter into the story themselves. When we just blitz information, it just feels like that's for somebody else, or we don't capture their attention and even help people enter into that. I think the biggest mistake that churches make is, for storytelling, they view the need for a story comes up when they hear of a small group that met somebody in the hospital. Like, they met the person in the hospital, they all sat around and prayed for that person, they were on their deathbed, and then now they're miraculously saved, which I believe still happens. I'm not saying that doesn't still happen. It's a beautiful, awesome story, but it's hard for people to relate to. They don't see themselves in it.
Sure.
But when we can share the story of somebody that said, hey, I was too busy to be in a small group, I thought it wasn't worth my time, I didn't really know, I thought our kids are too busy right now, and I didn't want to just sit around in a circle and pray because I don't know the Bible super well. But my wife and I just decided, hey, we're going to give it a shot, and here's what happened, and here's what life change we've experienced. When we tell a story like that, everybody's like, oh, that's me. Like, I am too busy right now, that's why I'm not doing this. Or right. Oh yeah, I thought if they can do that with their kids right now in that season of life, then maybe I can. Like, that's the beauty of storytelling. It doesn't have to be sensational. Sometimes it just has to be practical and authentic. But that's the opportunity we have. And it doesn't always have to be a video. Sometimes it's a short, social media post that creates some interest, or it's a story that you share in an offering setup or something like that. There's a lot of opportunities to share stories. But as communication leaders, we need to be collecting those at all times. And we need to lower the bar of saying it's not the sensational that could be a Hallmark movie.
Right.
It's the practical of saying, hey, who overcame this barrier that everybody else resonates with? And how can we leverage that story to help other people engage in it? So that's the power of story. It's way better than information. Inspiration always wins.
Okay, listeners, if you do not have Rethink Communication, this is not an option. So we're not saying if you'd like to check out Phil's book. No. If you do not own it, you need to go get it. Phil, where can anybody who doesn't yet have Rethink Communication track it down?
Yeah, you can just go to rethinkcommunicationbook.com, and there's links there for all the places that you can download or purchase that, or you can just Google it or go on Amazon and just search Rethink Communication or my name, Phil Bowdle, and find it there.
And if somebody wants to connect with you and hang out with you on social media and on your blog, how do they track you down there?
Yeah, just Phil Bowdle, PhilBowdle.com. And if you get the book, my phone number's in the back. So you can shoot me a text. A lot of people have of just asking a question or sharing something fun, that they're learning. So feel free to connect with me that way as well.
Cool. Phil, thank you so much for hanging out. I'm excited for what you're doing for church communications everywhere and practically seeing it working at Westridge. So thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, friends on the Church Marketing Ideas podcast, and any friends of Adam who are listening to this or watching this. I'm Neil Smith. I'm a consultant, author, speaker. I do all kinds of things. I was a pastor for many years. Social media pastor actually was my job title. And I've been living in the world of social media for many years. I actually wrote a book called Social Media Guide for Ministry about 8 years ago. And I had somebody email me the other day saying, I just got your book. I can't wait to read it. And I was like, don't read the book. It's 8 years old. Social media has changed so much in 8 years. And I wanted to create resource, and I've been creating resources to help churches. I believe, though, I've just created the best resource to help churches grow with social media. And I'm talking about grow numerically and spiritually. So I want you to check it out. It's a free resource. There's 3 training videos. We're going to have Facebook comments and learn and grow together. So go to churchmarketingideas.com/grow, churchmarketingideas.com/grow, and go check out this resource. Sign up, get the free resource, and engage in the conversation. Let's start growing your church together using social media.
Hey, Adam. We have our church's Facebook Live broadcast every week, but after Sunday afternoon, not many people watch it again. How can we extend the life or maximize the impact of our service video?
So this isn't an uncommon problem. It's pretty typical that after Sunday morning or after your service ends, that your live broadcast doesn't get the amount of traction as it did when it's live. This is partially because Facebook loves live video. They love live engagement, but not entirely the case. You see, the reality is not very many people are going to Facebook to watch live form video, long form video, in a way that your Sunday broadcast is. People are much more likely to watch a 3 to 5 minute clip than they are to watch a clip the length of time of your service. So to get more traction, you actually have to do a little bit of work, but you're going to want to take your long form video and chop it down into 3 to 5 minute clips, usually 2 or 3 per week. And that will allow you to take those individual clips and answer individual questions. So often your sermon might be structured like you're going to have an intro, you're going to have 3 points that might be related to 3 scriptures, and then an ending. Well, there's 3 or 4 options for 5 minute clips. You also could take your songs, the recordings that you made during worship, and chop them into individual clips and put them on, depending on your audio quality and how they're going to represent your church and all those types of things. We all know live music in any form doesn't represent studio music, so use your discretion there. But that's the way. The actual long form video probably isn't going to get much traction on its own, although it is helpful to download that and put it on YouTube for somebody who wants to see what your service is like. But how to get the best traction is to take your sermon and chop it into little bite-sized clips. Use those again on social media. And if you need help with that, we can always help you with that. My team at sermonclipper.com can help you take that long form video, chop it into clips that you can use in different forms on social media. If you have a question for the Church Marketing Ideas podcast, just go to churchmarketingideas.com and click Ask a Question. I promise I'll answer all those questions, and some of them will choose to show up on the podcast. Coming up on the next episode.
So I don't know if you, when you were a kid, if at the park by you, they had these things. In our neighborhood, they called them merry-go-rounds, and they call different things across the country. And what they were was a large flat metal disc, like really, really heavy, and then it had usually had 4 posts on it, and it was kind of spinning on an axis. And what you would do is you'd put 1 foot on the disc and then 1 foot on the ground, and you'd push that first time around, and it was almost impossible to push it the first time. And then the second time was a little less, a little less work. And then the third time, a little less and a little less and a little less. And finally, what would happen is you would go from pushing hard to hardly pushing. Well, that's a flywheel. It's this idea that if we kind of apply effort in a consistent direction over a period of time, that effort gains momentum. And I think that's kind of the core thesis of the book, that there isn't anything, there's not one silver bullet around church growth. It's really a series of things that if we do together consistently over time, we'll see some impact.